We're back for the third and final segment with mor2 from RSA, the security division of EMC, and this is their fraud action research labs over in Israel. Mor is one of the communication folks that we talk to over there. It's usually either Mor or Lamore. All right, and this week we're getting a pretty good digest on these DDoS attacks. More before you get into it, anything else that you wanted to wrap up with, or do you want to get right into a summary, or what do you want to do?
Since we're short on time, I'm guessing I'll go into how HTTP flooding works.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, so
We've got time, by the way. We're good on the clock.
we're good on the clock.
Yep.
Okay. So, a second. Okay, so basically there are different kinds of DDoS attacks, and I just saw a comment here by someone that says that maybe there's no lasting effect, but definitely, organizations and websites do lose money from not having their site available, and definitely there's a reputation damage involved, and that's exactly what hacktivists are after. It's gaining a lot of attention and doing some damage, but that's as far as the effect goes.
Hey, I've got a question for you, and I told you I wouldn't interrupt you, because I know that's being rude. But we've got a comment coming up here on the chat, and I don't know if you can see it or not. Annette Doctor is saying a couple of things, but his question is: so what's the defense for a DDoS attack?
So what's the defense? So there are several defenses, which if we have time, I'll get into. But basically, there's three main systems that can be used to block attacks. Those are firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, or IPSs, and web application firewalls.
Okay.
Or WAFs.
Okay.
And I can get into that later if we have time.
Yeah, we've got about 4 minutes left.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
So I think I'll have to go straight into HTTP flooding.
Go ahead.
So basically, different protocols can be used to generate different kinds of attacks. There's TCP flooding, also known as half full SYN or half open or full SYN attacks, ICMP or ping attacks, and HTTP flooding. Most of these kinds of attacks have already been mitigated by some security solution or another. For example, TCP SYN attacks have been mitigated by something called TCP cookies. Ping attacks are not, cannot be launched when most web servers actually block ping communications coming in. So basically, HTTP is one of the most common attacks and one of the most effective, actually. And how HTTP flooding works is that it's basically, if you imagine that you're calling up information or 411 and asking the operator for a bunch of information you don't need. So we're talking about just asking the operator for thousands of addresses and numbers, and meanwhile the operator can't handle genuine users. So in the real world, a web server would be flooded with requests to provide attackers with a bunch of content that they don't need. Usually, to be effective, an attack has to ask for very heavy content, such as several megabytes of pictures or music videos. Whereas a page full of text can take anywhere from dozens of kilobytes to hundreds of kilobytes. A really good effective attack would be requesting things that weigh several megabytes or more. So, and then what happens is the web server is just, its processing power is completely used up. The web server's bandwidth is completely used up, and when that happens, the website's resources are exhausted to the point where they can't provide any service, and the website is basically brought down. So, if we'll go to just several systems that are used to handle HTTP attacks, the first one would be firewalls. Firewalls are only effective against mitigating poorly planned attacks. Since the firewall is a pretty simple system, it mainly looks at source IP and destination IP of the incoming connection. So, basically the firewall is asking, where's this connection coming from, where's it going, and this is allowed to go there. So if you have an attack where, and you know the exact IP addresses where it's coming from, and it's pretty consistent, then firewalls are good to mitigate those kinds of attacks. Just to give you an example, several Israeli banks, as you mentioned several weeks ago, were DDoS last month, and because the banks were able to see that the IP addresses that were attacking the banks were outside of Israel, then it was pretty simple to configure the firewall to not let in any connection that comes from a non-Israeli IP address. So some Israeli banks just completely blocked off any traffic coming from outside of Israel, while others could identify that traffic was coming in from such countries as Saudi Arabia or Iran or Algeria, and then they blocked off those GeoIPs from the firewall, through the firewall. So I'm just going to mention briefly intrusion prevention systems. IPSs contain a firewall or are used with a firewall, except that they are more complex. They operate according to predefined rules, and they can do some more complex, basically more complex behavior. For example, if they see that the same IP address is trying to make 100 connections in less than a minute, they'll know how to block it. So IPSs are expensive, whereas firewalls are cheap. But IPSs can be configured to look at more complex behaviors. And then last but not least, web application firewalls are used to handle incoming web traffic at the HTTP level. WAFs are basically used for various kinds of HTTP attacks, including SQL ingestions and cross-site scripting. And I believe that's what we have time for today.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of information. More, if I could ask you to, the Net Doctor's got some questions and is, I guess, challenging some of the things that's being said on the broadcast today as well, which is all good and fine and well, because he's got some serious disagreements. He's saying firewalls, IDS, and a number of different things are not defenses. All right, and he's saying that
Well, again, I just want to say in that respect that we're talking about simple, poorly crafted DDoS attacks. We're not talking about sophisticated, well-planned attacks. As I said in the beginning of the segment, a good, well-planned DDoS attack is going to be effective. Because it's just a matter of processing power and bandwidth versus the processing power and the bandwidth of the attackers. So if a web server is only built to handle 1,000 incoming connections and you're flooding it with 10,000 connections, then you're going to exhaust its bandwidth, its processing power, and no firewall or IPS is going to help you with that.
Right. So he's after the recording here, maybe you can get on to the chat with him because he's looking for some solutions for a multinational bank. So why don't you engage him on the chat later? I know we kind of limit the time you have with us, so you can't be as comprehensive as you'd like to. But that's what happens. We've got more coming up on the show in the next 3 minutes, so we've got to kind of cut you here. We certainly thank you for coming on the program today, and we look forward to having you over and over and over again for a long time to come. All right, mor2, RSA, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.